She was forced to sit alone at her ex's wedding, until a Hell's Angel leaned down and said, "Act like you're with me." Everyone stopped. The whispers died. The woman they once pitied suddenly had the most dangerous man in the room standing at her side. But this wasn't just a fake rescue. Behind that leather jacket was a past darker than anyone knew, and a secret that tied him to the groom himself. As sparks fly between a heartbroken woman and a man running from his sins, one act of kindness turns into a night that changes everything. Because sometimes, the person who saves you from humiliation might be the one who needs saving most. But when his old enemies return, and the truth about his past explodes, will their fragile hope survive? Or will she lose the only man who ever saw her worth? Drop a comment below, and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The envelope looked like it belonged to someone else's life. It was white with a gold edge and her name written in a careful hand. Catherine Jensen. It lay on her little dining table beside a half-finished mug of tea. Sunlight came through the thin curtains and made the gold line glow. She did not touch it at first. She only stared at it, as if time would push it away. When she finally opened it, the paper felt thick and smooth. The words were simple. "You are invited to celebrate the wedding of Mark Langford." Her eyes caught on his name. Her breath went tight in her chest. She read the rest out loud to the empty room because hearing it made it real. The date, the venue, the line about love and joy. Catherine set the invitation down and pressed her palms to the table. She told herself she was fine. She told herself she had healed. It had been over a year since he left. She had built a quiet life. She had learned to make a little garden on the balcony. She had learned the names of the kids at the community center. She had learned how to sleep through the night again. Mostly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kelly lit the screen. "You okay? Coming by in 10. Catherine smiled even though her stomach churned. Kelly always came when she said she would. 10 minutes later, Kelly walked in with a bag of warm cinnamon rolls that smelled like comfort. She saw the envelope, stopped, and let out a soft whistle. "So he did it," she said. "He sent the thing." "He did," Catherine said. She tried to sound calm. "It's fine." Kelly put the bag down and pulled out a chair. "It is not fine, but it can be okay." She leaned forward. "Do you want to go?" "I don't know." Catherine rubbed her thumbs together. "Part of me wants to prove I'm okay, that I can show up and be steady." "Part of you wants to protect your heart," Kelly said. "That part is smart." Catherine looked at the invitation again. She had once pictured a wedding like that for herself. Flowers, music, a promise spoken with full hearts. She had pictured Mark's hand holding hers. That dream had cracked and fallen to pieces, and she had swept those pieces away one by one, day by day. She did not want to gather them again. She did not want to bleed. Kelly touched her arm. "If you go, I support you. If you don't go, I support you. But don't go to prove anything to him. Go only if it helps you." Catherine nodded. She said she would think about it. She placed the invitation on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny bluebird. For 3 nights, she thought. She prayed in simple words the way she did when she was a child. "God, help me be brave. Help me be kind to myself. Help me be wise." On the 4th morning, she woke with a strange calm. She sent a reply card that said, "Attending" in neat cursive. She told herself she would go for closure. She would be gentle with her heart. She would smile. She would leave early if she needed to. The week moved like a slow river. She worked at the community center, checked homework sheets, and poured paper cups of cocoa for kids after school. She watered the basil plant on the balcony. She folded laundry while the news murmured in the background. At night, she sat on the edge of her bed and practiced breathing deep and even. She tried on 2 dresses and settled on the simple blue one that made her feel steady. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and clear. She woke before her alarm and listened to the birds. Her chest felt hollow but not broken. She showered, dried her hair, and put on the softest makeup she owned. When she fastened the tiny silver necklace her mother had given her, her hands shook. She closed her eyes. "It's just a day," she whispered. "Just a room, just people." She slipped her clutch into her purse and headed out. The venue stood on a hill, all glass and white stone. Cars glittered across the lot like beetles. Catherine parked far from the entrance so she could walk and breathe. The sky was a deep, kind blue. Trees leaned in a little, as if they wanted to listen. She held her purse tight and stepped through the big doors where the air smelled like lilies and lemon polish. Inside, everything shone. A string quartet played a soft song she used to hum while cooking dinner with Mark. The tune touched a memory, and she felt it, sharp and light at once. She followed the signs, found the guest book, and signed her name in careful letters. Catherine J. The woman at the welcome table smiled the practiced smile of someone paid to be kind. "Your seat number?" she asked. Catherine gave her name. The woman ran a fingertip down a list, and then paused. "Yes, you're at table 19. She handed Catherine a card with a tiny map on it, and another smile that didn't reach her eyes. Table 19 sat near the back, close to a swinging door that let out the clear clang of trays and the hiss of steam. It was a little round island that did not match the pretty sea of tables near the front, all covered with peonies and crystal. There was only one chair at table 19. Just one. The card with her name stood in the center, neat and lonely. For a moment, Catherine stood very still. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. Her throat went tight. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, a simple oversight. She looked back at the welcome table. The woman was already greeting another guest. People moved around her in pretty clothes. Laughter hit the air like light. The music swelled. Nobody was looking at her table, but it still felt as if the whole room knew. She sat. The chair wobbled just a little. She placed her clutch on her lap and smoothed her dress. She could smell garlic and butter from the kitchen. A server pushed through the swinging door with a tray of glasses and nearly bumped the back of her chair. "Sorry," he whispered, and he was kind, but the word still stung. It would have been easy to leave right then. She thought about it. She could walk out, get in her car, drive to the lake, and breathe under the trees. But she had promised herself she would not run from rooms. Not today. She lifted her chin and looked toward the front of the hall. Mark stood near the altar with the officiant, tall and smooth in a fitted suit. His smile was the same as always, bright and careful. A woman in a perfect white dress walked up the aisle, and the crowd turned into a wall of faces full of joy. Catherine made herself breathe with the music. In, out. She did not let any tears spill. She watched the ceremony the way a person watches rain through a window. She was inside and outside at once. When the vows were done and the kiss was given and the applause crashed like a wave, she clapped too. Her hands trembled. She whispered, "Goodbye." But no one could hear her voice under the cheers. She sat still while people stood and hugged and made small, happy noises with their mouths. She waited for the room to shift to the reception. The change came quick. Lights brightened. Staff moved like dancers to set things in place. The quartet slid into a light tune. Guests flowed to their seats. The tables near the front filled with old friends and new money. The centerpieces there were tall and lush. At table 19, the flowers were small and low. She smiled at her own little arrangement. The daisies tried so hard. A woman from her old circle spotted her and walked over in high heels that clicked like castanets. "Catherine, you look, well." Her smile said almost instead of well. She glanced at the lone chair, then at Catherine's hands. "Are you here alone?" she asked, the way someone might ask if you had lost your coat. "Yes," Catherine said. She kept her voice even. "It's a nice day?" "It is," the woman said, still looking for something to pick at. "Well, enjoy." She drifted away, leaving behind a faint cloud of perfume and old judgment. Another guest came to the back to check his phone, saw Catherine, and gave a quick nod before hurrying off. The space near the kitchen stayed busy with staff and quiet with guests. A server placed a glass of water on her table and set down a bread basket with care. "Everything okay?" he asked in a low voice, genuine this time. "Yes," Catherine said, and she meant it as a wish. "Thank you." She broke a piece of bread and took a small bite. The crust was warm and cracked in her fingers. She chewed slowly and listened to the clink of glasses and the hum of talk. She let the sounds wash over her like a river she could float upon and not drown. The toasts began. Laughter rose and hung like glitter in the air. Stories from college and work and trips she had not been on shimmered at the edges of the room. Catherine took small sips of water. She kept her face soft. When the best man said something about Mark's strong heart and loyal spirit, she let her eyes fall to her lap. She thought of the day he had left. She thought of how loyalty could end with a neat text and a slow silence. She thought of how a strong heart could choose itself and leave another heart to learn how to beat alone. She did not stay in that thought long. She would not live there. She lifted her head and looked for something good. A child in a blue bow tie spun himself in circles until he tumbled onto a carpeted step. He laughed at his own fall and clapped for himself. Catherine smiled. She let that small joy be a hand that helped her stand up inside herself. Dinner arrived in courses. A salad that tasted like lemon and hope. A dish of chicken with creamy sauce that went cold while she pushed it around the plate. Between courses, staff moved through the swinging door with trays like ships sailing in and out of a bright harbor. Catherine grew used to the draft when the door opened and shut. She grew used to the hum of machines on the other side. Ice, steam, the low roll of dish carts. A slow song began. Couples rose and swayed under the fairy lights strung across the ceiling. Faces softened. Hands found each other. Catherine folded her napkin, stood, and walked to the restroom. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman who had done hard things and had not broken. She fixed a loose strand of hair, took one steady breath, and went back to table 19. On her way, she heard two guests near the bar whisper her name. She did not catch the whole sentence, just the tone. Pity. She swallowed it like a sour fruit and kept walking. When she sat again, she wished for a friend beside her, for Kelly's loud laugh and sharp words that could cut through slime like that. But Kelly was at her son's soccer game today, and this was Catherine's road to walk. Another toast began, this time the grooms. Mark thanked the guests, thanked the staff, thanked his new wife, and thanked old friends who showed up to wish us well. His eyes skimmed the room. For a second, they met Catherine's. The look did not stay. It slipped away quick, like a fish that did not want to be seen. She felt that old pull in her chest, the one that had once drawn her toward him even when her feet should have stayed still. She closed her fingers around the stem of her glass and told her hands to be gentle with it. The music changed again. Brighter now. The dance floor filled. Laughter loosened. Someone at a nearby table tipped a chair back and caught it just before it fell. The swinging door thumped open and shut, a small drum beat at the edge of the song. Catherine sat and watched and breathed. That was when the rumble came. It started outside, low at first, then bigger, like distant thunder rolling closer. Some heads turned toward the glass doors. The rumble grew into the steady growl of a motorcycle engine. The sound cut through the music and the light talk and the clink of forks. It reached the back of the hall and settled in everyone's bones. The bike shut off. The glass doors swung wide. A tall figure stepped inside, bringing a thread of cool air with him. He wore a black leather vest, plain jeans, and heavy boots that made no noise on the polished floor. He did not look around like a guest who belonged. He walked slow, steady, sure. The room shifted. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. A few people laughed in a high, thin way that sounded like fear in a fancy suit. Catherine's heart thudded once, hard. She had never seen this man before, but the sight of him made her sit up straight. He carried something in his face that did not match the pretty room. A kind of weather, a kind of road. He had a short beard and eyes that were calm in a way that only comes after storms. He scanned the crowd as if looking for a single small lighthouse on a dark shore. He found her. He walked the length of the hall without hurry, past the tall flowers and the neat napkins and the safe smiles. People stepped aside. Someone whispered the word biker like it was a warning. The music stuttered and then kept going because the band did not know what else to do. The man reached table 19 and stopped. He took in the single chair, the small flowers, the kitchen door, the woman sitting alone with her hands folded tight. He leaned down, not too close, just enough that she could hear only him. His voice came out low and even, a voice trained to cut through wind. "Act like you're with me," he said. Catherine blinked. She did not move at first. The sentence landed like a hand on her shoulder, firm, warm, asking nothing she did not want to give. His eyes held hers. There was no mockery in them, no pity, only a strange, solid kindness, like a beam under a roof that had sagged too long. He did not reach for her. He did not grab or push or show off. He simply stood there, a wall against the room's sharp edges, waiting for her to decide who she wanted to be in the next breath. The smell of engine oil and rain clung to his jacket. Behind him, the swinging door bumped open and shut, like a small heartbeat keeping time. Catherine felt the heat in, her cheeks cool. Her hands loosened on the clutch in her lap. She looked up at the man who had brought a road into a bright hall and asked her to stand in its shelter. She almost smiled. "All right," she said, her voice a whisper that tasted like courage. And the whole room seemed to pause, like a held breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The room stayed frozen for half a heartbeat after the stranger spoke. Then the chatter started again. Low, unsure, like a crowd trying to pretend nothing unusual had happened. Catherine sat still, every nerve bright and alive. The man in the leather vest didn't move until she gave a tiny nod. Then he pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, as if he'd been invited. He reached for a glass of water from a passing tray and placed it in front of her, calm and matter-of-fact. "Keep your chin up," he said quietly. "You don't owe them your shame." His voice was low, steady, touched by gravel. Catherine's pulse slowed. She lifted her chin the way he told her to. From across the room she caught the bride's puzzled frown, the groom's quick glance. The whispers began again, but this time the tone had changed. The man leaned back, one arm resting on the chair behind her, not touching but near enough that the space around her felt shielded. When a server approached, he smiled and said, "Could we get another setting here, please?" The young waiter blinked, nodded fast, and hurried off. The simple act looked like power wrapped in courtesy. Catherine tried to find her voice. "You don't have to—" "I know," he said. "But you looked like you needed a friend." The words landed softly. No pity, no flirt. Just truth. Dinner plates clattered in the distance. Music changed to a livelier beat. Around them, the celebration resumed its flow, but the air near table 19 felt different now. Grounded, safer. Catherine took a slow sip of water. "What's your name?" she asked. He gave a half smile. "People call me Rev." "Rev," she repeated. "Short for Reverend?" He chuckled once. "Funny you'd think that. Used to be because I liked engines. Now I guess it fits another way." She wanted to ask more, but stopped herself. He wasn't dressed for church, and his eyes had seen too much road. For the first time that day, she relaxed her shoulders. When the next dance song started, Rev stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said. "Oh, I don't—" "Trust me, they're already watching. Might as well give them something kind to look at." His grin made her laugh. She let him lead her to the dance floor. The crowd parted a little, curiosity tugging at their gazes. Rev moved with surprising grace for such a large man. He guided her gently, never pushing, just steady steps. The light touched the edge of his beard. She saw a thin scar near his jaw. "Why are you really here?" she asked when the music softened. "Long story," he said. "Let's just say I wanted to look someone in the eye who forgot what decency means." She followed his glance toward the groom and felt her stomach twist. "You know him?" "Used to," Rev said. "He wronged somebody I loved. I figured I'd make sure he doesn't rewrite that story tonight." Catherine's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "You didn't do it." The song ended. Applause fluttered like paper. Rev bowed his head slightly to her, then to the onlookers, and escorted her back to the table. For once, nobody dared whisper when she sat down. Later, as dessert plates arrived, Mark made his way towards them. He stopped at their table, his perfect smile stretched thin. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said to Catherine, voice low. "I was invited," she said, calm as still water. He turned to Revum. "And you are?" "Someone who remembers your debts," Rev answered evenly. "You should enjoy your evening, Mark." Mark's jaw tensed, but the eyes around the room kept him polite. "Of course." He left with his new wife on his arm, pretending nothing had happened. Catherine exhaled. "You didn't have to do that?" "Yeah," Rev said, "but sometimes standing next to someone's enough to make a bully step back." When the band switched to a fast tune, the lights dimmed. Catherine noticed the servers cleaning near the kitchen door. Beyond it came the thud of crates and a sharp voice shouting orders. The day's strain started to slip off her shoulders. She felt almost light again. Then, outside the windows, headlights swept across the glass. A group of men in worn jackets spilled from the parking lot, laughing too loud. Rev's eyes narrowed. "Stay here," he said quietly. Before she could answer, one of the men banged on the window and grinned through it. "Rev, thought you gave up showing your face." The room stiffened. Catherine's heart raced. Rev moved fast, out through the side door before security could react. Shouts burst in the parking lot. She caught sight of him standing tall under the lights, speaking calm at first, then stepping between two men who shoved each other. A chair toppled. Someone yelled. The groom's guests crowded near the doors to watch. Catherine stood frozen. The next moment a siren wailed far off. Rev pushed one man back, not hard, just enough to break the circle, and motioned for another to leave. When flashing blue lights turned the walls cold, Rev jogged towards the back lot. Catherine didn't think. She grabbed her clutch and hurried through the rain-slick exit. He was straddling his motorcycle, engine coughing. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "You'll get blamed for that fight," she said. "Let me drive you somewhere before the cops think—" His bike sputtered again and died. Rain thickened into sheets. He sighed. "Figures." "My place is 3 blocks," she said quickly. "You can dry off, fix it later." He hesitated, scanning. The dark street, then nodded once. "All right. Lead the way." They walked side by side through puddles. Streetlights painted long reflections ahead of them. Catherine hugged her shawl close, aware of the strange comfort in his presence. By the time they reached her small apartment, both were soaked. She unlocked the door and gestured inside. "Towels in the bathroom. I'll make tea." Rev wiped water from his beard and gave a small nod. "Thanks." The kettle hissed while thunder rolled far away. Catherine found an old sweatshirt for him and set it on the couch. When he came out of the bathroom, hair damp, wearing her oversized shirt that barely fit his shoulders, she couldn't help smiling. "Looks better on me," he said with a grin that warmed the room. She handed him a mug. "So, Hell's Angel?" "Used to be," he said. "I left that life." "Why?" He stared into his tea. "Because I lost someone I couldn't get back. My sister. The man who married tonight had a hand in it." The room went quiet, except for rain against the window. "I'm sorry," she said again, and this time the words meant more. He nodded. "Don't be. Tonight wasn't about revenge. I just needed to see that he couldn't hurt anyone else." Catherine sat on the couch across from him. The lamplight made their shadows touch on the wall. "You did help someone else," she said softly. "You helped me?" He looked up, surprised. "Guess we both needed saving from something." Outside, the storm eased. Inside, the air felt calm for the first time all day. Rev stretched out, eyes heavy with travel and worry. Catherine brought him a blanket and laid it over his shoulders. "Get some rest," she said. "We'll figure out your bike in the morning." He started to protest, then saw the steadiness in her eyes, and stopped. "All right," he murmured. "Good night." Catherine turned off the lamp. The faint light from the street brushed across the room. She stood for a moment, watching the rain slow to a whisper. Something deep inside her, a place that had felt cold for so long, began to thaw. When she finally went to her bedroom, the sound of the rain faded behind her door. Rev's breathing settled into the rhythm of someone who had finally found a place safe enough to sleep. And though she couldn't explain why, Catherine smiled into the dark, knowing that this night, strange as it was, had changed the course of both their lives. Morning sunlight poured through the thin curtains, painting soft golden stripes across Catherine's living room. The smell of rain still lingered in the air. On the couch, Rev stirred beneath the blanket she'd given him. For a moment, he looked peaceful, so different from the man who had walked into that bright wedding hall the night before. Catherine stood quietly in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. She wasn't sure what to do now that it was morning. Her mind replayed the scene from the wedding, the humiliation, the whispers, and then the moment the stranger had said, Act like you're with me. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had stood up for her like that. When Rev opened his eyes, he blinked as if unsure where he was. Then he sat up, pushing a hand through his damp hair. "Sorry," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Didn't mean to crash here all night." "It's fine," Catherine said softly. "You were soaked, and your bike didn't sound too happy." Rev gave a small laugh. "That old thing's been with me longer than anyone else. I'll get her running again." He stood, folding the blanket neatly over the back of the couch. Catherine poured a second mug and handed it to him. "Sugar's on the table, cream's in the fridge, or black, like a proper biker, right?" He smirked. "You'd be surprised. I take 2 sugars. Guess I'm not much of a biker anymore." They drank in silence for a few moments. Outside, the street was quiet except for a distant truck engine and the call of a mourning dove. "Thanks for letting me in," he said after a while. "Not everyone opens their door to a stranger." "You didn't feel like a stranger," she said, then flushed a little at her own honesty. "You felt like someone safe." He looked at her, surprised, but didn't speak. He seemed to weigh her words, then nodded once as if accepting a truth he didn't expect. Catherine moved around the kitchen, setting bread in the toaster. "You hungry?" "I could eat," he said. As they sat down to breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and a little jam, Catherine asked, "Do you have somewhere to be today?" He shrugged. "Not really. I take day jobs when I can. I fix cars, fences, whatever people need. Helps me keep my hands busy." "Where do you live?" "Nowhere in particular," he said simply. "Sometimes a motel. Sometimes the shelter near the edge of town. Doesn't matter much to me." Catherine frowned. "You could stay here a little longer, at least until the rain stops. I've got a porch that could use fixing if you want to work for breakfast." Rev smiled. "Deal." They spent the late morning outside. The rain had left the air cool and bright, the kind of weather that made the world feel freshly washed. Rev examined the porch railing, his calloused fingers tracing the splintered wood. "Loose nails, weak boards," he murmured. "You'd hurt yourself leaning on this." He went to his bike, rummaged through a saddlebag, and came back with a small set of tools. As he worked, Catherine knelt nearby, handing him screws and boards. Their conversation was easy, quiet but comfortable. She noticed how gentle his movements were. Every time he hammered a nail or adjusted a plank, he did it with care, as though the porch mattered more than it should. "You've done this before," she said. Rev nodded. "I built porches for my sister once. She liked sitting outside, said it helped her think." There was something tender in his voice when he spoke of her. Catherine hesitated, then asked, "She's gone?" "Yeah," he said softly. "A few years now. She was younger than me. Trusted the wrong people." He didn't have to say more. The weight in his eyes told the rest of the story. "I'm sorry," Catherine said. He gave a small smile. "You keep saying that. Because I mean it." Rev nodded once. "Thank you." By noon, the porch was steady again. Catherine brought out 2 glasses of lemonade. They sat side by side on the steps, watching sunlight drip through the wet leaves. "I haven't said this in a while," she murmured, "but thank you. For last night. You didn't know me, but you helped me anyway." Rev's jaw tightened slightly. "Didn't do it for thanks. Just couldn't stand the way they looked at you. Reminded me of how folks used to look at me, like I wasn't worth the air I breathed." Catherine turned toward him. "You don't seem like that man anymore." "Maybe not," he said, "but I still see him in the mirror sometimes." They sat quietly for a long while. The dog from the next house trotted over and sniffed around their feet. Catherine smiled and scratched behind its ears. "You ever think people can really change?" she asked suddenly. Rev looked out toward the road. "I think they can heal," he said. "Change sounds like turning into someone else. Healing's more like remembering who you were before the hurt." Catherine's throat tightened. "I like that." They spent the afternoon walking to the community center where Catherine worked. She wanted to show him what she did, though she wasn't sure why. The old brick building stood near the park, its paint fading but its spirit still strong. Children played basketball in the back lot, laughter echoing across the walls. "This place," she said proudly, "it's small, but it matters." Rev nodded. "You built something good here." "I'm just part of it," she said. "But it's in trouble. The grant that funds us ends next month. We might have to shut down." Rev's expression darkened. "That's not right." "It's just how it goes. People forget places like this. They forget the ones who need it most." He studied the worn benches and cracked pavement. Maybe folks just need a reason to remember. That night, Catherine made soup while Rev tinkered with the motorcycle out front. The rhythmic clank of tools mixed with the hum of crickets. Every so often he muttered to himself, half prayer, half promise. When she brought him a bowl, he smiled up at her. "You didn't have to cook." "I wanted to," she said. "It's been a long time since anyone fixed something for me. I figured it was my turn." They ate together under the porch light. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you fixing besides engines and porches?" Rev looked at the sky, where a single star had appeared. "Mostly myself," he said quietly. Catherine nodded. "Maybe we're both doing that." When the evening cooled, he stood to leave. "I should find a place to crash. Don't want to overstay." "You're not overstaying," she said quickly. "Stay one more night. The roads are still slick." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but tomorrow I'll be out of your hair." She smiled faintly. "We'll see about that." Before going to bed, Catherine checked the window one last time. Rev sat on the porch, his shoulders broad against the night sky, the repaired railing beside him. The faint glow from the streetlight framed him in gold. He looked tired, but peaceful, like a man finding his way back home after a long road. Catherine whispered a quiet prayer. Not for herself this time, but for him. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in years, her heart didn't feel so alone. And in the cool silence of that gentle night, she knew. Something new had begun. Catherine woke to the faint sound of a hammer tapping outside. The air smelled of wet earth and coffee. She slipped on her robe and peeked through the window. Rev was already up, tightening the last bolts on his motorcycle. The early sun touched the edges of his hair, and for a moment she thought he looked like a piece of the world that belonged out there, not here in her quiet yard. She brewed 2 cups of coffee and stepped outside. "Morning," she said. Rev looked up and smiled. "Morning, ma'am. Hope I didn't wake you." "You didn't. You work early." "Old habits," he said. "Sunrise means another chance to start over." She handed him the coffee, and they sat on the porch steps. The sky was a pale gold, the streets still damp from last night's rain. Catherine took a sip and said, "I was thinking about what you said yesterday, about people healing. It stayed with me." Rev tilted his head, his eyes soft. "That so?" "I think maybe I've been stuck waiting for someone to tell me I was worth healing. Maybe that's not how it works." He gave a half smile. "Sometimes you gotta decide you are, even when no one else does." They finished their coffee in silence. The calm felt natural now. By mid-morning, Rev helped Catherine carry boxes into her car. She was heading to the community center early for the weekly volunteer meeting. When he saw the load, He grabbed the heaviest ones without asking. "You're coming with me," she said, pretending not to smile. "Wasn't gonna let you haul all this yourself anyway," he said. The drive was short. The community center looked livelier than usual, even with peeling paint and tired windows. A few kids ran up to Catherine, shouting her name. She waved, her heart lightening. "This is where the good stuff happens," she said to Reva. He followed her inside. The walls were covered with children's drawings, messages about kindness and hope, written in crayon. A few volunteers greeted her warmly, though they paused when they saw Rev. His leather vest and heavy boots drew cautious looks. Catherine noticed and stepped closer to him, her voice warm. "Everyone, this is Rev. He's helping out today." That one sentence changed the air in the room. The volunteers smiled politely, some even shaking his hand. Rev nodded, grateful but quiet. They spent the next few hours sorting donated clothes and supplies. Rev worked hard and quick, turning broken shelves into sturdy ones, fixing a squeaky door without being asked. Catherine watched from across the room, how the kids looked at him in awe, how he knelt to talk to them eye level when one shy boy dropped a toy. During lunch, she handed him a sandwich. "You fit in here better than you think." He chuckled. "Didn't think I'd fit anywhere again." She smiled. "You'd be surprised what Grace looks like." That afternoon, Catherine's boss, a gray-haired man named Mr. Leland, pulled her aside. "We've had another notice," he said. "Funding's running out sooner than we thought. We might have just a month." Catherine's heart sank. "There must be something we can do." He sighed. "We'll talk options next week, but it's looking bad." When she told Rev on the ride home, he stayed quiet for a long time. Then he said, "If money's the problem, maybe we raise it." "How?" she asked. "We've already tried bake sales, charity dinners. Nobody came." He drummed his fingers against the window. "What about a ride?" She blinked. "A ride?" "Bikers, charity run. People pay to join, ride through town, raise money. It's worked before. You get the right folks involved, you'll have the whole county watching." Catherine smiled at the thought. A biker fundraiser for a children's center? That's unusual. "Unusual gets attention," he said with a grin. By evening, the plan started to form. Rev promised to reach out to some of his old contacts. The good ones, men and women who had left the rough life behind. Catherine would talk to the local paper and the mayor's office. They worked late, scribbling ideas on scrap paper. The energy between them buzzed with hope. For the first time in years, Catherine felt the thrill of possibility again. When she finally looked up, she realized the sun had gone down. "It's late," she said softly. Rev leaned back, stretching his arms. "Good kind of late." They shared a small smile, the kind that felt like a quiet agreement between two people trying to rebuild something precious. As Rev prepared to leave for the night, he paused at the door. "You're doing a good thing, Catherine. Don't let the world tell you it's too small to matter." She held his gaze. "And you, don't hide behind that leather and pretend you're just passing through." He chuckled. "Fair enough." After he left, Catherine sat by the window for a while, watching the streetlights shimmer on the wet pavement. She thought about the porch he had fixed, the laughter at the center, the kindness in his eyes. It scared her, the warmth blooming in her chest. But for once, she didn't push it away. The next morning, the sky stretched wide and blue as they gathered near the community center parking lot to discuss logistics. Catherine had barely slept, too full of excitement. Rev was already there, leaning against his bike, talking with two other riders, older men with gray in their beards and the same quiet respect in their posture. When she approached, one of them smiled. "So this is the lady saving the town," he said kindly. "Trying to," Catherine said. The men chuckled. Rev introduced them as Marty and Gus, former riders turned mechanics who ran a small repair shop nearby. "We'll spread the word," Marty said. "A charity ride's a good thing. People'll show." Catherine's eyes brightened. "Thank you." Over the next few days, word traveled fast. Posters went up in diners, coffee shops, and along the highway. Local businesses offered small donations and prizes. For every rejection, Rev shrugged it off. "We'll find someone else," he'd say. One night, while they painted banners in her living room, Catherine laughed as Rev accidentally smudged red paint across his cheek. "You look like you lost a fight with a crayon," she teased. He grinned, eyes twinkling. "You saying I'd lose?" "Maybe just to me." The banter came easy, natural, and when she caught herself staring at him longer than she meant to, she quickly looked away, heart fluttering. Rev noticed but didn't say anything. He simply hummed a tune while cleaning the brushes, an old country hymn she faintly remembered from childhood. The sound filled the room like a prayer that didn't need words. When the night ended, and they stood on the porch watching fireflies blink across the yard, Rev said softly, "You ever think maybe broken people find each other for a reason?" Catherine nodded slowly. "Maybe we do." They said goodnight, but both lay awake later, each thinking of the same thing, wondering if healing might be easier when you're not doing it alone. The morning of the charity ride arrived bright and cloudless, the kind of day that felt like a promise. Catherine stood in front of the community center, her hands trembling slightly as she pinned a banner across the entryway that read, "Second ride, Hope in Motion." Motorcycles lined the street, 30, maybe 40 of them, gleaming in the sunlight like rows of metal hearts. The engines purred, filling the air with a steady rhythm that sounded more like purpose than noise. Some riders wore leather jackets patched with faded insignias, others simple denim. There were women riders too, strong, smiling, waving at the kids who had come to watch. Rev stood near the front of the line, his bike spotless, his hair tied back, his face set in quiet determination. When he spotted Catherine, his whole expression softened. "You ready for this?" he asked, slipping off his gloves. She grinned nervously. "I think so, but my stomach might disagree." "You'll be fine," he said. "You built this day." "No," she replied gently. "We built it." Rev looked like he wanted to say something more, but before he could, the mayor's assistant, a round man in suspenders, stepped forward with a clipboard. "All right, everyone. Short route through Main Street, then out to the ridge and back. Keep it safe, keep it kind. We're raising funds, not raising dust." The riders laughed and cheered. When the engines started in unison, the ground itself seemed to hum. Catherine climbed into the small truck that would follow behind the bikes, waving to the children gathered on the sidewalk. The sound of the engines grew into a powerful roar that made her eyes sting. Not from fear, but from awe. It wasn't just a ride anymore. It was a moving heartbeat. As they rolled down Main Street, townsfolk came out of shops, waving and clapping. Some held signs, "Ride for the kids and second chances start here." Catherine pressed her hand over her mouth, overcome by emotion. Rev rode near the front, occasionally glancing back to make sure everything was running smoothly. At one point, a little boy ran to the curb holding a small cardboard sign that said, "Thank you, bikers." Rev slowed down just enough to reach out and tap the boy's hand, a gentle high five that made the child beam. When they reached the ridge outside town, the riders stopped for lunch at a picnic spot overlooking the valley. Catherine helped set up sandwiches and water bottles, while Rev and the others laughed over old stories. "You've got quite the crew," she said when he came over. "They're good folks," he said. Most of us came from the same rough roads. We just took different exits this time." Catherine looked around at the laughter, the warmth, the kids running with balloons. For a moment, she forgot every bit of pain she'd carried. Rev noticed her gaze on the horizon. "You look lighter," he said softly. She smiled. "Maybe I am." They rode back into town that afternoon, with sunlight catching in their mirrors. The entire event raised more than Catherine had dared hope, enough to keep the community center open for at least another year. When they returned, Rev stood in front of the crowd and lifted a small box, the donation jar, high above his head. "This isn't about bikers or buildings," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "It's about proving that grace can come from anywhere, even from people who used to be lost." The applause that followed was thunderous. Catherine felt tears sting her eyes. She looked at Rev and thought, God really does use the unexpected ones. That evening, after everyone left, she found Rev sitting on the steps of the community center, his jacket draped over one knee. The sky was painted in streaks of orange and pink. "You did something good today," she said. He glanced up. "So did you." "Feels like more than just saving a building," she said. He nodded slowly. "Maybe it's about saving parts of ourselves we thought were gone." A comfortable silence settled between them. The world smelled like dust and victory. After a while, Catherine stood and offered her hand. "Come on, you deserve a celebration dinner, and I don't mean cold leftovers." Rev hesitated, but her smile was impossible to refuse. "All right," he said, "but I'm paying." "No chance," she replied. "You already saved my day." They went to a small diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with checkered floors and a jukebox that still worked. Over burgers and fries, they talked about everything: faith, music, childhood dreams, the roads they never thought they'd take. At one point, Rev asked, "You ever think you'll love again?" Catherine paused, the question catching her off guard. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I used to think love was supposed to look perfect. Now I think maybe it just needs to be real." He nodded. "Real's good." Their eyes met and lingered just a second too long. When the check came, he reached for it, but she covered his hand. "We can split it," she said. He grinned. "You don't strike me as someone who splits much." "I do when it's fair." As they walked out into the cool evening, the neon lights from the diner flickered across the pavement. Catherine stopped beside his motorcycle. "Today felt like the first day of the rest of my life," she said softly. "Then ride it right," Rev said, putting on his gloves. "You've earned it." He climbed onto the bike, but before starting the engine, he looked at her. "Thank you for letting me be part of something good again." "You are something good," she said without thinking. He froze, the words hanging between them like a prayer. Then he gave her a small, almost shy smile. "See you tomorrow?" "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tomorrow." As he rode off, the taillight disappeared into the fading blue dusk. Catherine stood there a long time, the sound of the engine echoing in her chest like a heartbeat that finally remembered how to keep going. The next week began with laughter, sunshine, and a quiet sense of victory. The charity ride had changed everything. Donations poured in from local shops and churches. Children brought hand-painted thank you cards to the community center. For the first time in months, hope filled every corner of that old brick building. Catherine walked the halls humming softly, her hair tied back, her hands full of papers and smiles. Every few minutes, someone stopped her to say, "Thank you." Yet every time she passed the front door, she half expected to see Rev walk through it. He didn't. At least not right away. He showed up 3 days later, covered in dust and carrying a box of donated tools. "Miss me?" he teased, setting the box down with a grin. "Maybe a little," Catherine said, though her voice came out lighter than she meant. Rev helped repair a broken window that afternoon. They worked side by side, the easy rhythm between them feeling like something solid, something real. When the job was done, he brushed sawdust from his hands and looked at her. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked. "For the center?" "For you." Catherine hesitated. "I've been so busy fixing things outside that I forgot to think about myself." Rev nodded, understanding. "Yeah, been there." As they talked, a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh paint through the open window. It felt like renewal. But outside, 2 men watched from a parked truck, one of them wearing a leather jacket with a faded skull emblem on the back. That night, Catherine locked up the center alone. She didn't notice the truck idling down the street. She didn't see the man toss an empty beer can onto the curb before the vehicle rolled away. The next morning shattered the peace. Catherine arrived early and froze at the sight. Shattered glass, spray-painted slurs on the wall, the banner from the charity ride ripped in half. Her stomach dropped. Someone had vandalized the community center. She called Rev first. He arrived within minutes, his jaw tight, eyes burning. He walked the property in silence, then found a torn scrap of fabric near the door. A biker club patch, the same skull emblem she'd seen on that truck. Catherine's voice trembled. "Who are they?" "Old crew," he said flatly. "Guess they heard about me trying to play saint." She stepped closer. "You didn't—" "I didn't do this," he said sharply, then softened. "But it's on me. They're trying to send a message." By noon, rumors had spread. A reporter showed up, snapping photos. The mayor's assistant called, asking if Rev had been involved. By evening, the local paper ran a short piece. Ex-biker linked to community center damage. Catherine's boss, Mr. Leland, called her into his office. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "Until this is cleared up, we can't have him around the center. It's too much risk." Catherine's chest ached. "He didn't do it." "I believe you," Leland said. "But the donors won't." When she told Rev, he just nodded. "Figures," he muttered. "Can't outrun who you used to be." She grabbed his arm. "Don't say that. You're not that man anymore." He pulled free, pain flashing in his eyes. "You don't get it. That man's all they see." Then he turned and walked toward his bike. She followed him outside, heart pounding. "Rev, don't run." "I'm not running," he said, voice low. "I'm giving you back your peace. You deserve a clean life, Catherine. Not one. That gets dirt from mine." The words struck like stones. He swung his leg over the bike, the engine coughing to life. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavy. He looked at her one last time, rain streaking down his face. "You were the good part, you know that?" he said quietly. "Don't forget that." Then he rode off, the sound of the motorcycle fading into the storm. Catherine stood in the rain long after he was gone. Around her, the painted walls of the center dripped color like tears. The air smelled of mud and heartbreak. Inside, she found a note on her desk, his handwriting rough but careful. "You deserve peace. I can't give you that." Her hands trembled as she folded it, the note blurred through her tears. For the first time in months, the community center felt empty again. And in the silence, she whispered the only thing she could. "Please come back." The days that followed felt longer than any Catherine could remember. The laughter that had once filled the community center was gone, replaced by whispers and uncertainty. She cleaned the graffiti herself, scrubbing until her hands blistered, unwilling to let hate have the last word. The smell of paint and soap clung to her clothes, Every stroke of the brush hurt, but it was also a prayer, one she repeated silently. Please keep him safe. Rev didn't call. He didn't come by. His absence left a space in her world that no amount of busy work could fill. Kelly stopped by one evening with takeout and worry in her eyes. You've barely eaten, she said. I'm fine, Catherine lied. Just tired. Kelly studied her. You miss him. Catherine stared down at her food. He didn't deserve what they're saying. He finally found peace and they tore it away. Kelly reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then find a way to give it back. That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the empty street. Rev's note lay on the table beside her, the paper soft from being unfolded too many times. You deserve peace. I can't give you that. The words broke her heart every time she read them. She thought about all he'd done, the way he'd defended her at the wedding, fixed her porch, brought light back into the community center. A man like that didn't deserve to disappear under lies. And she couldn't stand by while he carried guilt that wasn't his. By morning, she had a plan. She stopped at a diner near the highway, the one she'd heard some of the old riders still visited. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with bright pink nails, recognized Rev's name right away. Haven't seen him in a few days, she said. But those other fellas came through. The ones with the skull patch. Loud. Mean. Bragging about teaching someone a lesson. Catherine's pulse quickened. Do you know where they went? The woman nodded toward the outskirts of town. There's an old auto yard past the bridge. They hang there sometimes. Catherine thanked her and left before fear could talk her out of it. The drive was short but tense. When she reached the junkyard, she parked far back and walked the rest of the way. Rusted cars lay stacked like broken bones. A dog barked in the distance. She crouched behind a heap of tires and peeked out. 3 men stood near a fire barrel, laughing. She recognized one of them, the same man she'd seen in the truck that day outside the center. And there, nailed to a wooden post, was the other half of the torn charity banner. Her chest tightened. Proof. They had done it. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo, then another. But as she stepped back, her foot hit a metal can. It rattled across the gravel. The men turned sharply. Hey, who's there? One shouted. Catherine bolted. Her heart thundered as she ran back toward her car. She heard footsteps pounding behind her, curses cutting through the air. She reached the driver's side, jumped in, and locked the door just as one of them yanked the handle. The engine sputtered to life. She hit the gas and sped off, gravel spraying behind her. Her hands shook the whole drive back to town, but she didn't stop. She went straight to the police station, marched to the front desk, and showed the photos to the officer on duty. They're the ones who vandalized the center, she said breathlessly. The officer studied the images, then nodded. We'll look into it. Good work, ma'am. As she turned to leave, the officer added, That biker friend of yours? We heard he's been out near the old church grounds, helping rebuild some storm damage. Thought you might want to know. Catherine froze. He's been here all along? Guess so, the officer said with a shrug. Her eyes filled with tears of relief. She thanked him and hurried outside. The wind felt colder now, but her heart burned with purpose. By evening, she found herself standing near the small, half-restored chapel on the hill. Through the open doorway, she saw him. Rev, hammering boards across the window, his shoulders hunched with effort. He didn't notice her until she spoke. You fix everything but yourself, don't you? He turned, startled. When he saw her, the hammer slipped from his hand. Catherine? You didn't have to disappear, she said softly. You didn't have to carry their sin. He stepped closer, eyes full of disbelief. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." "I brought proof," she said, holding up her phone. "They framed you. I showed the police. It's over, Rev." He stared at her for a long moment, the fight draining from his face. Then he laughed, quiet, disbelieving. "You did that for me." Catherine smiled through her tears. "You did it first." For the first time in days, the tension in his shoulders eased. He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. The weight between them finally lifted. "Guess neither of us was meant to heal alone," he said. And under the fading light, with the old church glowing behind them, Catherine knew he was right. The next morning, sunlight poured through the chapel windows, bright and golden. Catherine and Rev stood side by side, watching the police car pull away from the junkyard at the bottom of the hill. The men who had vandalized the community center were in custody, their laughter replaced by silence. Justice had come quietly, without revenge, just truth. Rev exhaled, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "Didn't think anyone would ever fight for me," he said softly. Catherine looked at him. "You fought for me first." He smiled, small but real. "Guess we even." They walked back toward town, the dirt road winding between trees just beginning to bloom. The air smelled like rain and redemption. As they neared the community center, they saw volunteers gathered outside, repainting the last of the damaged wall. Kids laughed while Kelly passed out lemonade. When Catherine appeared, everyone cheered. Rev hung back, uncertain. But Catherine took his hand and pulled him forward. "This is where you belong," she said. Mr. Leland approached with a sheepish smile. "Heard the news. Seems we owe this man an apology." Rev nodded. "No hard feelings." The crowd clapped, and for a moment, time slowed. The sound of laughter, brushes against paint, and the hum of life filled the street again. Later that evening, the two of them sat on the newly rebuilt porch. The horizon burned orange, and a soft wind moved through the trees. "So what now?" Catherine asked quietly. Rev turned to her, eyes gentle. "Now we keep doing what we've been doing, helping people who think they've run out of road." She smiled. "Together?" He squeezed her hand. "If you'll have me." She laughed through tears. "I already do." A moment passed before Rev spoke again, voice low and rough. "That night at the wedding, when I said, 'Act like you're with me,' I think I was hoping it could be true someday." Catherine's heart swelled. "It already is," she whispered. The sun dipped below the hills, leaving streaks of gold in the sky. In the quiet, their joined hands rested between them, steady, warm, and certain. And for the first time, both of them knew they had finally found home. Weeks passed, and peace slowly returned to the town. The community center, once scarred and broken, now gleamed with fresh paint and laughter. Catherine renamed it Second Ride, in honor of the event that had saved it. And the man who had reminded her that grace often came wearing dusty boots. Every morning, she arrived early, unlocking the doors to a rush of cheerful voices. Rev came too, always carrying a box of tools or a new idea. He'd repaired almost everything that could be fixed. The windows, the porch steps, even the old piano that hadn't played in years. One afternoon, they hosted a neighborhood gathering to celebrate the reopening. Children ran through the halls with balloons, while music drifted from the speakers. Catherine stood near the doorway, watching Rev teach a group of boys how to sand a wooden bench. The way he smiled, patient and proud, filled her heart with quiet joy. Kelly came up beside her. "You two make a good team," she said. Catherine blushed. "We just understand each other." Kelly chuckled. "Honey, understanding looks a lot like love." Catherine laughed softly, not arguing because maybe it was true. Later, after everyone left, she and Rev stayed behind to clean up. The setting sun painted the room in soft amber light. He leaned against the wall, looking tired but happy. "Never thought I'd see this place full again," he said. "You made it happen," she replied. He shook his head. "No, you believed when nobody else did." For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the air warm between them. Catherine picked up a stray paper heart from the floor and smiled. "Funny how broken things can still be beautiful," she murmured. Rev nodded. "Guess that includes people too." Their eyes met, and in that stillness, everything felt whole. The pain of the past no longer haunted them. It had turned into something sacred, something they'd both needed to reach this point. When they finally stepped outside, the stars were just beginning to appear. Rev looked up and said quietly, "Second ride, huh? Maybe it's not just the center that got one." Catherine smiled, slipping her hand into his. "No," she said. "It's us too." Night settled softly over the town, wrapping everything in calm. The lights of Second Ride glowed warm through the windows as Catherine and Rev locked up for the day. The quiet between them wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful, full of shared breaths and silent gratitude. Rev handed her his jacket when the wind picked up, and she smiled, pulling it close. "Feels like the start of something good," he said. Catherine nodded, her eyes bright. "No," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "It already is." And under the stars, they simply stayed, together, unafraid. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Second Ride, filling the room with gold. Catherine arranged fresh flowers on the welcome table, while Rev repaired a loose hinge on the door. Everything felt calm, purposeful, and right. Children's laughter floated in from outside, and the smell of coffee mingled with sawdust. Rev straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hard to believe this place was falling apart not long ago," he said. Catherine smiled. "Sometimes things have to break before they can be rebuilt stronger." He nodded thoughtfully. "Guess that goes for people too." She walked over, touching his arm gently. "I'm glad you stayed." He looked at her with quiet affection. Wasn't planning on leaving again. Outside, the church. Bell rang in the distance, soft and clear. Catherine reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining easily. The world finally felt steady, and so did they. Spring spread warmth through the valley, soft and new. The garden outside Second Ride bloomed with color, and the laughter of children drifted through the air. Catherine leaned against the porch rail, breathing in the scent of fresh soil and lilacs. Rev came up beside her carrying his helmet. The motorcycle gleamed nearby, its silver paint catching the sunlight. Across the tank, the word Grace shimmered faintly. "She's ready," Rev said. "Thought we might take a ride, see where the road leads." Catherine smiled, her eyes bright. "I think we already know." They closed the center for the day, waving goodbye to volunteers and children. Then Rev helped her onto the bike, his hands steady, gentle. The engine rumbled to life, deep and reassuring. As they rode through the open road, the wind carried away the last traces of sorrow. They stopped at the ridge overlooking the town, the same view where the charity ride had begun. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light. Rev looked at her and said softly, "Funny how a broken past can lead to something whole." Catherine rested her head on his shoulder. "That's Grace," she whispered. They sat there together, quiet and content, the world stretching wide before them. The road was open, the future unwritten, and for the first time, neither of them was afraid to begin again, side by side, hearts finally home. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.